Imagine the king of rock and roll, Elvis Presley, cruising down a dusty Mississippi highway in his shiny Stutz Bearcat. The summer sun blazes overhead, the air is thick with heat, and the road ahead seems endless. On the side of Highway 51, in the middle of nowhere, sits a boy no older than 11. His clothes are dusty, his face is streaked with sweat, and yet there he is, sitting proudly behind a tiny wooden stand piled high with watermelons. Now picture this. Elvis, the biggest star in the world, pulls his car to the side of the road. He steps out, dressed sharp as always, and walks straight toward that boy. And what happened next? Well, it became one of the most unforgettable snapshots of Elvis's true character. This isn't just a story about watermelons. It's a story about kindness, generosity, and the way Elvis could turn an ordinary moment into something magical. Tonight, we're diving into the legendary story of Elvis Presley buying out a little boy's watermelon stand, plus the deeper meaning behind it, the history surrounding it, and the powerful lessons it leaves us with today. Part 1. Setting the stage. The sun was merciless that afternoon, beating down on the long stretch of Highway 51 that cut through the heart of Mississippi. The air shimmered, above the blacktop thick with heat and dust, the kind of southern heat that clung to your skin and made the landscape feel endless. Cars were few and far between. This was the rural South in the 1970s, where life moved slower, where you could drive for miles and feel like you were the only soul alive. But that afternoon, the quiet hum of the countryside was interrupted by the low, throaty growl of an engine unlike any other. Sleek, powerful, and unmistakably stylish, Elvis Presley's Stutz Bearcat rolled down the highway like a spaceship gliding through another world. It was a car that screamed success, chrome gleaming, body lines smooth and elegant, the kind of ride only a superstar could command. Inside, Elvis was behind the wheel, relaxed but alert, sunglasses shading his eyes from the glare of the sun. Riding with him were three people who knew him best: Sam Thompson, his trusted bodyguard and friend, Sam's wife Louise, and Sam's sister Linda, who was deeply connected to Elvis in her own right. The group had just left a visit to Elvis's Old Circle G Ranch, a place loaded with memories of both dreams and disappointments, and were heading back toward Memphis. The air inside the Stutz was lighter than the heat outside. They laughed, shared stories, and Elvis, as always, carried the conversation with his wit and charm. He was a man who loved to be around people, to joke, to reminisce, to dream aloud about the next project or adventure. But as much as Elvis loved the company of friends, he also had a way of noticing the world outside, always scanning, always connecting, always alert to life in its raw, simple form. And that's when he saw him. On the side of the road, perched beside a rough wooden stand, sat a boy. He couldn't have been more than 10 or 11 years old. His hair was tousled, his shirt stuck to his back from the heat, and his face was streaked with dust. But there he was, sitting tall and proud behind a little display of watermelons stacked as neatly as his young hands could manage. The boy wasn't playing or wandering, he was working, a child-turned-businessman, holding his ground beneath the sweltering Mississippi sun. Elvis slowed the car, his eyes fixed on the boy. Sam glanced over, puzzled at first, then quickly understood. Elvis Presley, the king of rock and roll, wasn't the kind of man to drive past something that pulled at his heart. He saw in that boy not just a child selling fruit, but something far deeper, a reflection of his own youth, the struggles he'd faced growing up poor in Tupelo, trying to help his parents make ends meet any way he could. Without a second thought, Elvis pulled the Stutz Bearcat to the side of the road. Gravel crunched under the tires as the car rolled to a stop, its polished frame a stark contrast to the dust and sweat of the boy's little stand. For a moment, the two worlds hung there together, the world of unimaginable fame and fortune, and the world of simple, hard-earned survival. "Come on," Elvis said with a grin, stepping out of the car. The sun hit him full force, but he didn't care. His boots crunched on the gravel as he walked toward the stand. every step echoing with curiosity and purpose. Part 2. Elvis meets the boy. The boy didn't flinch. He sat there, arms folded across, his chest, his small frame radiating a quiet toughness that belied his age. He knew who Elvis was. Of course he did. By that time, everyone in the South knew the face, the voice, the legend. But this boy wasn't about to show it. He wasn't about to squeal or shout or leap up in awe. He was a businessman, and this was his stand. If Elvis Presley wanted a watermelon, he'd have to play by the rules of the stand. Elvis smiled as he approached, tipping his head slightly in greeting. "How much are the watermelons?" he asked, his voice carrying that familiar Southern drawl, warm and casual. The boy didn't blink. He named his price, firm, steady, no hesitation. Elvis raised an eyebrow, amused. "That much, huh?" Teased, leaning on the stand as if ready to haggle. "Now, what if I told you I could get one for just a little bit less?" The boy's eyes narrowed slightly, but he didn't move. He wasn't about to give in, not even to Elvis Presley. His price was his price, and he wasn't going to budge. Sam, Louise, and Linda stood back, watching the exchange with growing smiles. They knew Elvis well enough to recognize the spark in his eyes. He wasn't annoyed. He was delighted. He loved this kind of thing, the back and forth, the toughness, the spirit. And in this dusty little boy, he saw a reflection of his own determination. That fire he'd carried as a child when life gave him nothing for free. "Well then," Elvis said finally, standing upright and looking around at the rows of melons. His grin widened. "I'll tell you what, we'll take the whole stand." For a split second, the boy's mask of toughness cracked. His eyes widened, his mouth opened just slightly, and the disbelief showed before he could hide it. Elvis Presley, this man standing right in front of him, wasn't just buying a melon. He was buying them all. The boy tried to hold himself steady, to keep that hard-earned toughness intact, but the moment betrayed him. His face lit up, just for an instant, with a mix of shock, pride, and joy. He had just made the sale of his young life, and to Elvis Presley no less. Elvis laughed, delighted by the boy's reaction, and began helping to load the melons into the car. Sam and the others pitched in, and soon the sleek Stutz Bearcat was packed with watermelons, its luxury interior filled with the sweet, earthy scent of fresh fruit. As they worked, Elvis kept glancing at the boy, offering a wink, a grin, a nod of approval. He wasn't just buying melons. He was giving the boy something far greater, a memory, a story, a moment of validation that would stay with him forever. And as they pulled away, the boy stood a little taller, his dust-covered face breaking into a proud smile. He had held his ground, he had made his sale, and he had shared a moment with Elvis Presley that would echo through his life long after the dust of that highway had settled. Part 3. The Negotiation. A duel of wills. The boy had already impressed Elvis with his toughness. But this was where the scene truly became unforgettable. Elvis, the man who could buy Cadillacs like most people bought candy bars, was now standing, face to face with a boy who refused to budge over the price of a watermelon. "Now listen here, son," Elvis said, his voice playful but serious enough to test the waters. "You sure you can't shave off a little bit for me?" The boy squinted, folding his arms tighter across his chest. "No, sir, that's the price." Sam Thompson, standing nearby, could barely contain his grin. He'd seen Elvis negotiate before, sometimes just for fun, other times to test people's solve. But this boy had a steel backbone. Elvis leaned down closer, a mischievous sparkle in his eye. "Not even for me?" he asked. The boy hesitated for half a breath, his lips twitching as if he might smile. But then he shook his head, firm as ever. "Nope." It was a standoff. A king of rock and roll versus a king of melons, standing in the blazing Mississippi heat. For a moment, it almost seemed like Elvis might keep pushing, but then his grin widened, that trademark Presley charm spreading across his face. "Well," he said, straightening up, "I reckon you drive a hard bargain. In fact, you're so good at it." He paused dramatically. I think we'll just take the whole stand, and that was the breaking point. The boy's mask cracked wide open. His eyes shot open, his jaw dropped, and for the first time he looked like what he really was. A child, stunned by the generosity of the man standing in front of him. Part 4. The Heart of Elvis. Why it mattered. Now here's the thing. To outsiders, this story might just sound like Elvis buying a few melons for the fun of it. But for those who knew Elvis, for those who loved him, this moment tells you more about the man than any concert review or flashy headline ever could. Because Elvis didn't see just a boy. He saw himself. Elvis remembered being that age, growing up poor in Tupelo. He knew what it was like to have to work for every penny, to watch your parents struggle, to feel the weight of poverty pressing down on you while you still dreamed of something bigger. Selling fruit by the side of the road? That could have been him 20 years earlier. And so when Elvis bought those melons, it wasn't about the fruit. It was about honoring that boy's toughness, rewarding his spirit, and in some small way giving back to the kind of world that had shaped Elvis himself. This was who Elvis was at his core. The same man who gave away Cadillacs to strangers, who handed out jewelry like candy, who quietly paid off hospital bills for fans he barely knew. He wasn't just a superstar, he was a giver, and he didn't give for attention. Most of the time, nobody even heard these stories until years later, when friends and bodyguards like Sam shared them. Elvis gave because it brought him joy. 5. The aftermath. A boy's memory of a lifetime. Picture that boy for a moment. Imagine him walking home that evening, dust still clinging to his clothes, his pockets suddenly full of money. Imagine the look on his parents' faces when he told them, "Mama, you won't believe this. Elvis Presley bought every watermelon I had." The pride, the disbelief, the sheer joy of that moment must have echoed through his family for years. Long after the melons were gone, long after the money was spent, the memory remained. And that's the beauty of Elvis's kindness. It wasn't just about the gift itself. It was about the story it created. A story that lived on in the heart of a child, a family, and eventually, through Sam's retelling, in the hearts of fans all around the world. Part 6. Circle G Ranch. The Mississippi Connection. The location of this story is just as important as the story itself. Elvis and his friends were returning from Circle G Ranch, a property Elvis had once poured his heart into. Back in the 1960s, Elvis had dreamed of turning Circle G into a retreat, a place where he and Priscilla could live a simpler, quieter life. Away from the chaos of fame. He imagined raising horses, having cookouts, inviting family and friends to enjoy the land. For a while, it was his sanctuary, a place where he could reconnect with the roots that fame sometimes pulled him away from. By the time of this watermelon story, Circle G was no longer his main property, but it still carried memories. Driving through Mississippi, Elvis wasn't just a superstar in a flashy car. He was a Southern boy returning to his roots, revisiting the land that had shaped him. And maybe that's why the watermelon boy caught his attention, because Elvis saw in him not just a child, but a reflection of the South itself. Tough, proud, simple, hard-working. Part 7. Lessons from the King. So, what can we learn from this? First, generosity doesn't have to be grand. Yes, Elvis bought cars and homes for people, but sometimes the simplest acts, a bag of groceries, a watermelon stand, carry the deepest meaning. Second, Elvis had an uncanny ability to see people. He didn't just pass by strangers. He noticed them. He paid attention. He respected them. And third, Elvis never lost touch with his roots. No matter how famous he became, no matter how much money he made, he still remembered what it felt like to be poor, to hustle, to dream. That's why his generosity felt so genuine, because it came from a place of empathy. Part 8. Fan Reflections. The ripple effect stories like this are why Elvis still holds such a special place in the hearts of millions. Fans don't just love the music, They love the man. Ask anyone who met him and you'll hear similar stories. Elvis giving his last dollar to a stranger. Elvis stopping his car to talk to fans on the street. Elvis reaching out to help quietly when no one else knew. These moments weren't public stunts. They were private acts of kindness that only became known because someone else remembered them. And yet these small moments ripple outwards. They inspire others. They remind us that kindness is contagious, that generosity has the power to echo through generations. Part 9, Closing Message. Why this story matters. At the end of the day, the watermelon stand story is more than just a fun anecdote. It's a glimpse into the real Elvis Presley, the man behind the music, the legend, the icon. It shows us his humor, his generosity, his empathy. It shows us that he never forgot where he came from. And it reminds us why, even decades after his passing, Elvis's spirit still feels so alive. Because Elvis didn't just sing songs, he lived them. He lived kindness, he lived gratitude, he lived love. And through stories like this, we get to keep that spirit alive too. Now, for those of you still listening, for those true fans who stayed with me until the end, this part is just for you. Think about this. Elvis didn't have to stop that day. He didn't have to roll down Highway 51, see that boy, and make his whole summer. But he did. Because deep down, Elvis cared about people. Not fame, not fortune, but people. And that's why you're here, isn't it? Because you care too. Because you know Elvis wasn't just the king of rock and roll, he was the king of hearts. So here's my gift to you, the loyal fan listening to my voice right now. The next time life feels tough, the next time you feel overlooked or underappreciated, remember the watermelon stand story. Remember how Elvis noticed the boy nobody else would have noticed. And remember that Elvis would have noticed you too. Because in his eyes, every fan mattered. Every person mattered. And today, that legacy lives on. Not just in his music, but in every act of kindness we carry forward in his name. So thank you very much for listening. You're not just a fan. You're part of the family.